Welcome everybody to our regularly scheduled meeting of the Bel Aire City Council, February 19th. And on tonight's agenda we have a proclamation, and we're going to look at a ordinance and an agreement and a policy and an easement. So that's on our agenda for later on this evening. Opening prayer. I understand that Father Hedrick was unable to make it this evening, so we'll certainly look to get him rescheduled, but would ask that you join us in a moment of silent prayer, please. Amen. Now please rise and join us in the saying of the Pledge of Allegiance to the American flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The first thing to come before council this evening is the consent agenda, which simply consists of the minutes from our February 5th meeting.
Mr. Mayor, I have one correction to request on the consent agenda under item 3D.
In the consent agenda or in the minutes?
In the minutes, I'm sorry.
Okay.
The minutes, yes.
What page?
Page 3, City Manager's Report.
Oh.
It says the WAPO's transportation plan, and that's actually the Wichita Transit Authority plan. This is the Wichita Transit Authority that's looking.
Okay.
We're doing the surveys about. Yep.
So entertaining motion. Yeah.
I move to approve the consent agenda as amended and authorize the mayor to sign. Second.
First and a second, and again that is with the change Councilmember Benage offered. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Appropriations this meeting totals $329,818.48. Had a couple of $30-some thousand payments. One was to MKEC, and then we had a $33,000 payment to Waste Connections. But other than that, that's kind of the regular day-to-day operations.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I move to approve appropriations ordinance 19-04.
I'll second.
First and second. Are there any questions or comments? Hearing none, call for the vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. We do have a proclamation today. Is there anybody here from Sunrise? Seeing none, I understand that they were going to try to make it this evening, but got warning they may not be able to. So I'm going to go ahead and read the proclamation here from the bench. National Speech and Debate Education Day. To the citizens of Bel Aire, Kansas, greetings. Whereas National Speech and Debate Education Day is being celebrated on March 1st, 2019. Whereas established by the National Speech and Debate Association in conjunction with national and local partners, this event serves to promote better instruction in speech and debate across all grade levels and to highlight the pivotal roles these abilities play in personal advocacy, social movements, and public policy making. And speech and debate education helps students develop important skills in communication, critical thinking, creativity, and collaboration through the practice of public speaking. Participants learn not only to analyze and express complex ideas effectively, but also to listen, concur, question, or dissent with reason and compassion. And across the country, countless educators devote in school, after school, and weekend time to supporting their students in speech and debate practices and competitions. The example of hard work and dedication they set has lasting positive impact on their pupils. And whereas the skills learned through speech and debate serve students well throughout their lives, and this occasion presents a welcome opportunity to recognize such instruction as an essential component of a well-rounded curriculum. Now therefore be it. Now therefore I, David Austin, Mayor of City of Bel Aire, on behalf of the entire City Council, do hereby proclaim March 1st, 2019 as National Speech and Debate Education Day in Bel Aire. So, sign that, pass that to the City Clerk, please. Okay, and under city requested appearances, we have entered into a contract a while ago. We hired Wichita State University to complete what's called a gap analysis and a demographic study for our city. These studies will help identify the various needs for services, retail, and commercial. And that's something that's important to all of us up here as we're trying to move forward with some of these land sales and identifying some good connections, possibilities, and the need for that. Mike Bush with Wichita State is here to present his findings and answer any questions. So, sir, I would invite you to the podium and for your presentation.
Mayor, I would like to mention we're having some technical difficulties with our projector. Okay. And so in your packet you have a copy of his graphs and stuff. So he's going to go ahead with the presentation and maybe explain some of the graphs and just basically talk about some of his findings. Though.
Okay.
Thank you for having me here tonight. I'm Mike Bush, as you said. I'm a senior research economist at Wichita State University. And my colleagues and I put together this gap analysis and demographic analysis and commuting patterns analysis. I apologize if I cough a little bit tonight. I'm getting over a cold myself. So to start off, looked at, in the demographic and gap analysis, looked at both Bel Aire and 6 peer cities as points of comparison. And the peer cities we chose were Andover, Derby, Keachai, Mays, Park City, and Valley Center were the 6 peer cities chosen from around the Wichita area that have similar characteristics to Bel Aire. For the demographic analysis, we used the American Community Survey 5-year estimates from 2013 to 2017 to give us an idea of the residential population of each city, some of the basic demographics. And was demographic analysis included in their packet as well? Okay, great. I just want to go over some of the key findings from the demographics, since I know there's a whole lot of numbers there throughout the Excel file. So from the demographic analysis, we found that among the cities, Bel Aire had the 4th largest total population of 7,422. And the average age in Bel Aire was 38.9 years, which was the 2nd oldest among those 7 cities. Keachai was the oldest with 39.8 years of median age. Most of the cities ranged then from a low of about 32 to 35 years old. So Bel Aire is slightly older on average than some of the other communities around the Wichita area. And then to go with that, the percentage of the population under 18 was 26.6% in Bel Aire, which was the 5th highest among the cities. So again, that supports the slightly older than average population in the area, with an average household size in Bel Aire of 2.62 in the household, which was also one of the lowest, indicating goes with the relatively small fraction of people under 18 in the city. But then among educational attainment for people 25 or older in Bel Aire was 58.3% of Bel Aire residents over the age of 25 had a bachelor's degree or a graduate degree. And this is by far the highest of any of the 7 cities in the peer city group. The next highest was Andover, with about 48% having a bachelor's degree or higher as their highest degree. So Bel Aire is an average much more educated than the other cities around Wichita. And included in that was 23% of the population in Bel Aire has a graduate degree, a master's degree, a PhD, or some other form of advanced degree. And the median income in Bel Aire was $77,242, which is the third highest in the area. And then the most common employment occupation was the management and business professionals, which made up 59% of employed residents in the area. About 4,000 employed residents residing in the city. The most common industry amongst those was manufacturing, which represented about a quarter of employed residents. And so that's just to give a sort of brief overview of the demographics that we're looking at, and to give an idea of sort of the peer cities as well. And then the second part of the analysis that we looked at was the commuting patterns of the Bel Aire area. And here we found that, as I mentioned before, the total resident population in the city is 7,422. And the total working population who resides in the city is about 4,000 people. Of those 4,000 people, only 400 of them actually work in the city of Bel Aire. The other 3,600 commute out of the city to work, whether somewhere else in the Wichita area for the vast majority of those. Then also, there's 1,100 workers who commute into the city of Bel Aire to work during the day, so mostly from other communities in the Wichita area. So that leaves that only about 10% of Bel Aire's workers both work and reside in Bel Aire. And during the day, or the working population's about 5,000 people in Bel Aire. There's a net migration out of workers of about 2,500. So sort of at night, the population, when everyone's home, the population's about 7,400. And when everyone's at work, the population is about 5,000 for the city. One important exception to this is that it doesn't count students who are being educated, whether it's university students who might be leaving Bel Aire, or more importantly, for the magnet school and the other schools in town. If there are students coming from around the Wichita area to town, those would not be counted in this daytime population study that we did based on the American Community Survey. But still, I guess the key finding there is that the daytime population of the city is much smaller than the nighttime population. So that can help guide some of the retail and service businesses that might be attracted to the area, since more people here at night than during the day on average. And then for the core retail gap itself, we use those same 6 peer cities and Bel Aire. But for this, we used what's known as the NETS database, business database. It's a database of every business establishment in the country, and we had access to every business establishment in the state of Kansas, from which we were able to identify all business establishments that were located in the 7 cities, the 6 peer cities and Bel Aire. The benefits of using this are that we were able to estimate both sales and employment for all businesses, down to even self-employed individuals who might not necessarily be counted in the usual Bureau of Labor Statistics governmental statistics. So this gives a more holistic picture of all the retail and business services establishments in the area, since especially in retail and business services, many establishments are oftentimes in the business service, it's just a single individual self-employed that get overlooked from many business statistics. And from there, for the report itself, we aggregated this data, this business establishment level data, up to the 4-digit NAICS codes. So these are 4-digit industry codes that include things like in the retail sectors, it'd be like furniture stores, grocery stores, department stores, or some of the categories. And overall, there's 27 categories of retail establishments and 22 categories of business service establishments that we're able to identify and then calculate gaps for. And so the core purpose of the retail gap analysis is to give a sort of general, a rough estimate of what the retail picture is like in the peer cities, and compare that to Bel Aire, to sort of give a general picture of what retail looks like in the other cities around the area. And for the calculations in the spreadsheets themselves, we took the average for each of the peer cities and then population adjusted it to sort of create what the peer cities would look like if they were the same size as Bel Aire, to give a picture of what Bel Aire's retail would look like if it mirrored the other cities around the area. So some of the benefits of the retail gap then are that it helps identify perhaps overserved or more importantly underserved retail sectors. So when there's a negative gap present where we take the difference between sales from Bel Aire and the peer cities, when there's that sort of negative gap present indicates that Bel Aire has fewer sales in that sector than the peer cities would, or the peer cities do in the estimation. So that suggests that there is at least some potential for a market there for those retail sectors. Now, you'll turn to look at the retail sales graphs and on the 2014 page from the gap analysis itself. Probably the most important. I know it's again a whole lot of numbers on that, but overall, the retail sales for those 27 retail sectors are about 12.5% in Bel Aire of the level of the peer cities. So in other words, the peer cities on average have about 8 times as many volume of retail sales across those 27 retail sectors as compared to Bel Aire. And historically, this ratio was even larger. We have data going back to 1990 in the database. And Bel Aire's retail has grown some since 1990 and grown, in fact, faster than the peer cities, but still is growing from a very small base. So the peer cities have, throughout the entire 25 years we have data for, had a much larger retail base than Bel Aire. When we look at retail employment, it's about the same. That Bel Aire is about 15% of the retail employment of the peer cities. So again, about a little less than the 8 times as much employment in the peer cities on average relative to Bel Aire. And so that's mainly to say that overall Bel Aire is a much smaller retail sector than the peer cities. But more importantly is when we dive into the details of the analysis gives an idea of what the peer cities have in terms of retail. If we look through those 27 sectors, about half the employment in those sectors, and about half the sales, are comprised of just 2 retail sectors, the grocery store sector and the department store sector, that collectively make up about 44% of retail sales, and about the same for employment. About 150 people, on average, population adjusted in the peer cities, work in those 2 sectors. And overall, about 359 people, population adjusted, work in the retail sector in the peer cities, compared to about 54 for Bel Aire. And those 2 sectors make up the vast majority, or not the vast majority, excuse me, about half of the overall retail sector employment. Some other large employers are motor vehicle dealers, employ about 35 people between automobiles and other motor vehicles in the peer cities. In Bel Aire, the employment was estimated to be about approximately 2 individuals, so a large gap there. And building material and supply dealers, estimated to be about 33 people employed in the peer cities and about 18 in Bel Aire. And this sort of pattern goes throughout the entire retail sector, that there's not a single retail sector where Bel Aire has a higher employment than the peer cities. But the largest gaps exist in just the grocery store and department store categories, since Bel Aire has 0 employment in both, and they're such large employers in the peer cities. So overall, Bel Aire has a much smaller retail sector, and especially in the largest retail sectors for the peer cities, that's where the biggest gaps exist. But this goes down the line to every retail sector, down to even very small retail sectors like florists, used merchandise stores, even vending machine operators. There's a smaller employment and sales in the Bel Aire area than for the peer cities. So there's ample opportunity and potential markets in Bel Aire across every retail sector, it would appear. Though the largest would be those grocery store and department store sectors. Then on the business services side, we looked at 22 different business service sectors. And across those 22 sectors, we estimated that service sales and service employment in Bel Aire about 29% of what the peer city average was. So about 3 times, the peer cities had about 3 times as many sales and employees across those 22 service sectors. Now we looked at service sectors including, this includes things like legal services, accounting services, computer design, web design, advertising and marketing firms. It also includes traveling accommodations like hotels and restaurants, which are the single biggest of the service sectors amongst both the peer cities and Bel Aire. So amongst the peer cities, overall there were 559 people employed on average in the business services sector, but in Bel Aire that number was only 162 people were employed, estimated in the database. So that's, again, quite a large gap exists there. And the biggest gap is in the restaurant sector, where there are 37 individuals employed in Bel Aire, estimated, compared to 247 in the peer cities. So that's the biggest opportunity for growth in at least absolute terms for both employment and sales. And it continues, again, across all the business sectors, or essentially all the business sectors. There's a negative gap, which indicates that Bel Aire is underserved relative to the peer communities. So the biggest gaps, as I mentioned, were restaurants, but also computer design services and automotive repair services, which are 2 of the other relatively large employers in the peer cities, with about 50 individuals employed in the peer cities for computer systems design and about 30 employed for automotive repair. And Bel Aire has employment of estimated to be 2 individuals in automotive repair, with sales of about 165,000 compared to sales of over 2 million for the peer cities on average. So, and then the smallest gaps were in the personal care services, management services, and technical consulting services had the smallest gaps, where Bel Aire was almost the size of, in terms of employment and sales, of the peer cities. So they're still slightly below. But so this indicates across the retail and business services there's ample opportunity for growth potentially for Bel Aire, and helps give a guide for what the largest employers are in the peer cities. Those, across the business services and other services and retail, the biggest employers in the peer cities were restaurants, grocery stores, and department stores. But in essentially every category, there's potential for growth for Bel Aire, since there's an employment gap that exists between the peers and Bel Aire across all those categories. And I had some graphs to back that up as well, but since they're not displaying tonight, we've got some time to take questions, I think. So
wonderful. I really appreciate you being here and presenting all of this information, and I was able to look through it in the packet earlier, and this is really great news to have all this.
Great.
So you're a senior? Did you say?
No, I'm a senior research economist.
Senior researcher. Okay,
I'm not a
my
student
gosh.
at Wichita State.
Wow. Okay, I was. Well, I'm still impressed. But wonderful. Well, thank you for all this information. At this time, do any council members have any questions for Mr. Bush while he is here? Well, thank you so much for bringing this to our attention, and we'll certainly be digesting this for quite a while and going through it.
Great. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Next on our agenda is citizens' concerns, and I'm going to call up Daniel Moore from the Exotic Pet Shop here in Bel Aire, listening to the the analysis there on, this is a business that is wanting to expand here in Bel Aire. And I'll make disclosure, we spoke earlier today, and it said this would be a good time that he could come up under citizens' concerns. It's something that we will be asked to look at our next workshop, changing an ordinance, I guess, he's looking to expand. So at this point, I invite you up to the podium, and you can state your name and where you work and your address, and appreciate you being here.
Is the microphone working?
It is.
Okay. Hello? All right. Well, thank you guys very much for your time. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. I know I've had the privilege of meeting a few of you, and a couple of you wandered into our store. So my name is Daniel Moore. I'm the store manager and the educational event coordinator at Exotic Pets Wichita. We're located right off 37th and Woodlawn. We're actually right on the border of Bel Aire and Wichita. But we're here today to propose, hopefully, a change in your city ordinances in regarding us to be able to display various species within our store expansion. We opened up here August 1st in Bel Aire, and we've had a lot of success, so much to the point that we are now starting to expand. But not only in our store do we sell animals, but we have a big emphasis on educating people about animals. These aren't necessarily animals people are taking home as pets, but people have a lot of questions about animals that exist in our world today. And a few of these animals, no, not everybody should own. But I do strongly feel that it's important to explain to people why these animals are so important and efficient in our ecosystem, and why we should be learning to understand them versus fear and hate them. So a little background about myself is I'm actually a graduate from Friends University. I have a degree in zoo science, a degree that's allowed me to learn how to manage and care for animals in captivity. From a young age, I've had a big emphasis on reptiles, crocodilians, and larger snakes especially. Now, I know there's a lot of concern regarding these species, and there should be concern with these species. Any animal can cause harm if they're not treated correctly, or if they're, handled in a wrong way. You hear a lot about these issues in the Florida Everglades, specifically with the Burmese python and the American alligator. You hear about tragic events with them, it's maybe going after somebody's dog, going after, unfortunately, little children. But, unfortunately, we hear this commonly with dogs. There are no such thing as a bad dog. There's bad owners. It goes the same with any species of animal you care for. No animal is going out there to intentionally hunt or hurt a person out of spite. Unfortunately, it's natural. And if we do have these animals in captivity, such as our Sedgwick County Zoo, Tanganyika Zoo do, it's very, very important to properly maintain and house these animals to completely get rid of these, risks. What we're hoping to do at our store is to be able to display our 9-foot American alligator and one of our larger reticulated pythons. We go to a lot of schools, birthday parties, and events where these animals raise a lot of questions. Most people have, unfortunately, never heard of these animals. Being in central Kansas, they've also never seen one in person. And with education being a huge emphasis on what we do, it's always a very, very big reward to be able to inspire and educate the public about these animals and why we feel so strongly about them. We're not looking to sell these animals to people as pets. We're just mainly trying to educate the public even further about them. And, with the zoo, during my courses at the zoo, we found a lot of people cannot afford to go to the zoo to learn about animals. And we're entering a generation day and age where it's hard to get, the younger generation to even go outside, let alone read a book to educate themselves on these animals. So what better to teach a generation that's more about the visuals and to actually have these animals there to teach them in person and to hopefully inspire them to make a change in our world where these animals are drastically disappearing. And I know there's a lot of concerns. We always get the question, well, what happens if this gets out? With all of our animals, we take a lot of security protocols against them. They all have lock and key. There's only one point of entrance. They're all under secondary containment, which means even if they were to somehow, knock on wood, get out of their containment, they would still have to be able to unlock a store door and get outside. And even if it did get outside, unfortunately, there are no reptiles that would survive what's out here right now. They would perish, which, as a reptile enthusiast, I'm not keen to that idea, but I know that would put a lot of other people to ease. So yes, again, if it were to get out, unfortunately, I'm not saying that it would happen, given our security protocols, they wouldn't survive. And most animals aren't going to be going around actively trying to find people. They try to get away from people at all costs. But the animals we work with, especially being an event coordinator myself, I put a lot of time into training and enrichment for these animals to give them happy and healthy lives, just to make sure that they're not just surviving in captivity, but they're also thriving. And so that mental stimulation is key and important to their mental well-being. That way you don't have issues with, just throw it out there, when you have Tillicum at SeaWorld, high mental capacity animal, not enough mental stimulation, ends up snapping. These animals aren't programmed like that. They don't work like that. And so if you can train and work with these animals, they do end up taming down. Food is a huge motivator for these animals, and they can be put on routine training programs. The zoo's done it. I've done my internship through the Sedgwick County Zoo Amphibian Reptile Department. I've gotten hands-on work in actually training and working with these animals. But that's what I have to say.
Thank you so much. Yeah, say thank you so much for being here. And again, this is something, the way I understand, you guys are going to be working with our city attorney on an ordinance that we can talk about at our next workshop then to decide if we want to move forward to. So I thought this is something that I never imagined we'd be discussing as a governing body. So I'm glad you could come here tonight, and I will go on record saying, as a guy who does not like snakes, but I went in and really enjoyed my time at the store and the tour, and would encourage you guys to check it out, and so that way we can make an informed decision in the next few weeks. So thank you for being here.
Thank you very much.
Okay. With that, this time I'll open it up if there's anybody else who'd like to address council this evening on any agenda item. If not, we'll move on to reports, and I'll start with Councilmember Hotz.
I have no report, Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Benaj.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I have 3 items to discuss. First, I went to the Sedgwick County Association of Cities meeting in Derby on February 9th. There was a presentation there by Scott Lindebach. He's the Sedgwick County Stormwater Engineer. So that was a good educational presentation, kind of like Councilmember Eishoff has talked about water and how we just assume that it works, and there's a lot that goes into it, and there's equally a lot that goes into stormwater management to assure us that we don't get flooded. And sometimes it doesn't always work out because sometimes the water comes down faster than the systems can handle. But anyway, it's a good educational thing. So I suggest any individual or group that wants to know more about it, get a hold of Mr. Lindenbach. He has a very good presentation, and I think he is very willing and amicable to making that presentation to any group that would be interested. County Commissioner Jim Howe distributed his Howe County update at the meeting, and I have a copy of it for anybody that's interested, and I'll distribute that out for you. It is printed front and back, so if you're interested in that. And also the Sedgwick County Commission, or Sedgwick County Association of Cities, is considering redoing their bylaws. They're talking about voting on that in either March or April. And so here's a copy of the draft.
I'm sorry, Councilman. So these are things that were passed out at the SCAC committee?
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, these are not anything I put together.
No, I just making sure we got that right. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So for your information. I also attended the WAMPO meeting on February the 12th. The policy board approved a change in how projects are considered and approved. Currently, or not the current because they just changed it, but the previous method was there's a metropolitan transportation plan that communities put together and they present it to WAMPO. Of those, they consider those and have a stack of them that way more than they can manage. Of those, some of those become TIPs, or transportation improvement plans. Those are approved plans. The Woodlawn project is a TIP. It's been approved to be done. Okay, but and they usually use a 4-year horizon for doing that. But that's the way they have been doing it in the past. And the problem they found that process is it's too rigid. Something falls out, they can't figure out how to get something else in there and how to make that work. So what they approved on the February 12th was to do an 11-year horizon for those. So the Metropolitan Transportation Plan could be out 11 years, And then any of those things are available for tip approval and consideration in that 11-year horizon. So something for us to be aware of, because big picture of that tip, we would like to have projects in that tip probably that make sense to us. And I mentioned, I think at last council meeting, that sometime we should have a workshop on what projects we think we might want to do. This makes it even more seems to make more sense to do that because of that. So also, and I did a ride-along with Chief Atterbury on February 13th, and that was a very informative ride-along. And I really want to commend the chief on his working with people approach to law enforcement. So many times it seems like law enforcement has this, I'm the big guy and I'm going to get everybody. And that's not his approach. He really has a people first approach and wants to work with people. And so that's very good. And I really appreciate his taking the time. And that's my report.
Thank you. Councilmember Martin?
No report, Mayor.
Councilmember Smith?
I also have no report, Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Elsoff?
I have no report, Mr. Mayor.
I too have no formal report this evening, so with that, we will move down to our city attorney.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wanted to inform the council that House Bill 2219 was heard at the legislature this week. This bill would require, it was in committee at the legislature this week, and so there was an opportunity for a hearing. And this bill would require all public bodies subject to the Kansas Open Record Act to record videos or audio of all meetings and make those recordings available to the public within 24 hours. The issue with this bill was that it, as presented, it didn't define what make available to the public would mean. So, interpreting that could mean that every meeting, even the tree board meeting, would need to be recorded visually or in audio, and that recording would then have to be reviewed by staff within 24 hours and published in a way that the public could access it. So if that meant providing them with DVDs or audio files in some way, that could create storage burdens. It could create a substantial cost. And so the League of Kansas Municipalities was concerned about wanting those details to be ironed out before that bill made it out of committee. They asked cities to provide specific information on how we handle those records now and whether committees record or just write minutes or what. And we provided that information. We also took their survey and explained the cost burdens that we see. It was just general information. I spoke to the League general attorney right now, and she said that I spoke to her this morning, and she said she didn't believe that it was ready to make it out of committee just based on the hearing. But I wanted council to be aware, because if it does, it sounds like something that the council would want to weigh in on, especially because the cost burden of something like that could get very expensive. And to decide whether or not to support a bill like that within a few months, you'd want to kind of think about those costs and stuff. So I'll keep you updated if I hear anything else about it making it out of committee. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
City Manager?
Thank you, Mayor. I hope that it's okay if some of you have yielded your report time to me, because I have a couple items I want to expound on. Quickly, though, the Woodlawn Expansion Open House is going to be here at City Hall, and it's next Tuesday, February 26th, from 6 to 8 p.m. So the people that were here at your last council meeting to give their update will share that same information with the public and then be available to answer questions. And again, the idea is to gather input. We're working on putting together a questionnaire to go out and to gather all that information so that the council can make their determination on how they want to move forward with the Woodlawn expansion. Everybody undoubtedly has seen the snow outside. Just want to let you know Public Works are on 12-hour shifts now, and so there'll be someone out constantly through the night and through tomorrow working to keep the streets clean. They're going to work mainly on snow routes, and so Those are on the website if anybody has a question of where snow routes are, but they're mainly to City Hall, to the schools, the major highway or major arterials and such. The last thing I wanted to cover and spend a little time on is what brought this up is Councilmember Elsoff sent me a question about something that was in the Newton Kansan paper. And then it's also, there's a lot of stuff that's been going on next door, a lot of comments and stuff, but it's about water rates. And so apparently, City of El Dorado citizens were concerned about their water rates, and so they did a quick study and they put something together out like this, which they compared other cities, and Newton had the highest water or utility rates. Bel Aire was the second to the highest, and so obviously the newspaper got a hold of that. And so they started talking about that, their concerns, and then I've seen on Nextdoor some of our citizens and maybe on social media, and you may be getting some calls or emails and such about that. And so I wanted to expand a little bit on that. It doesn't matter where you live, what city you live in, you think your utility bills are high. And we all do that. But it's really difficult to compare apples to apples when you're looking at utility rates because every city is different. So, for example, in El Dorado's comparisons, they looked at El Dorado, City of Augusta, Andover, Wichita, Towanda, Bel Aire, Newton, Heston. City of El Dorado, Augusta, both have lakes. That's where they get their water. So all they have to pay for is treatment, which is less than what we have to do is pump the water out of our wells and then ship it over to the treatment plant and treat it and that kind of stuff. So there's an added cost to that. The city of Andover, Wichita actually provides their whole water system for them. So they purchase the water. Wichita maintains their meters, their lines. They send the information to the city and the city bills for it. So they have no treatment that they have to pay for. So when you look at our utilities, a lot of different cities, we have to pay for treatment, cost of treatment, cost of storage. We have 2 water towers. Those are a cost in maintaining those. So, it's very difficult to take cities and just blindly say we're all the same and so all of our costs are the same. So why are we paying more than somebody else? And there's reasons behind that. And then, of course, the other thing is you can always look at the different cities. We actually did a comparison a couple years ago, and we looked at several peer cities around. Rose Hill and Mays were both higher than us at that point. Park City, Goddard Valley Center, we were in Andover. We were higher than them, but on average about $20. So not a huge amount or anything like that, like what this is showing. So again, you can always pull out different cities that you want to and show where you're at in comparison to what other cities you pick. So that's something to keep in mind when you're looking at the one from El Dorado. I would doubt that they would come up with cities that showed them as the highest water rate. So anyway, so you've got all those factors. The other thing is that in the article, Newton talked about how they actually transfer funds from their utilities to their general fund to help fund the general fund to keep their taxes lower. So obviously there's more expenditures coming out of their utility funds because they're working to keep their mill levy funds. And speaking of mill levy, let's talk about taxes. So I looked at taxes, and Bel Aire total mill levies 149.6. El Dorado, who has one of the lowest apparent utility bills, is 174.25. Augusta, again, one of the lower utility, 174.16, and Andover, 164.4. So again, it's all in perspective. Water may in fact be cheaper in El Dorado. You're 20 miles from Bel Aire and Wichita. You're 25 mills higher in property taxes. So, what does that show you? So there's a lot of things to consider, and so I just wanted to kind of to share that. And then we always know that Wichita is the lowest because they sell water to all of us, and they can charge us more and help subsidize theirs. But Ms. Martina has mentioned it several times. The last few years, they're raising their rates 6 to 10% because they realize artificial low rates don't keep up with the failing infrastructure. And you've got water mains and sewer mains collapsing and things like that. So there's a cost of keeping your utility rates low. And Bel Aire's, and Wichita is experiencing that. So in the end, like I said, I just wanted to share with our citizens as they look at these things. There's a lot to think about besides just what some numbers show. The thing that I've thought is very positive is in reading some of the next door comments. Some of the people have actually said in there, you know what, our rates are higher, but I'd rather live in Bel Aire than El Dorado, and things like that. So there's a positive feeling about Bel Aire, and that's great. That's what we want to hear. And in the end, you think about, I have 2 older kids, and I pay $150 a month for cell phones, so they can text each other thousands of times and stuff like that. And I'm paying that. And the water bill, the average water bill is $118. And I've got a Cox bill that's $150, so I can watch movies and stuff. And I'm going to pay that for $150. But my water, my sewer, my trash is less than that, and I'm going to complain about it. So anyway, it's just a perspective I want everybody to keep in mind. And so when you look at that, I hope that you can kind of think about some of the things I've said. So thank you, Mayor.
All right. Thank you so much. That's a good comparison. All right. With that, we're going to move on to ordinances, resolutions, and final actions. And we have 4 items tonight. The first one is talking about an IRB with Empire Wall. They're actually completing their final loan, but they went over the $1.8 million original by $100,000, but the original IRB was up to 2.5. So it's good to know that we don't have any issues there. But to cover this extra $100,000, the bank is simply adding a second mortgage to the original loan, and is asking for an acknowledgement agreement from Bel Aire stating that they haven't defaulted on the IRB for that. So again, it's not a Bel Aire loan, just kind of an acknowledgement for them. And this is why they have that, the original 2.5 and the 1. They build this buffer in. So that is here. If there's any questions, I'm going to let Ty answer those, though.
I assume it's a correct assumption that they are not in delinquency on any payments.
Right, yeah, and we actually worked to put this, or the bank requested the acknowledgement agreement, and we ran that through Gilmore and Bell to make sure they were comfortable, who helps us with the IRBs and such, and they said it was fine.
Mr. Mayor, I'll make a motion to approve the acknowledgement agreement between the City of Bel Aire, the Empire Wall Systems Incorporated, and Vintage Bank, Kansas, and authorize the mayor to sign.
Second.
First and second, are there any other questions or comments? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Item B is we're talking about a speculative industrial building policy for this year. The Greater Wichita Partnership handles economic development for the entire region, and they work very closely with us here in Bel Aire. They've identified a need for spec buildings that are a minimum of 50,000 square feet with a minimum ceiling height of 28 feet. Businesses often are looking for a building to lease, and rarely, it's rarely there's any available this size or larger. The result is the company then goes to another part of the region, and we miss out on that. This policy was discussed at length at our last workshop, and encourages local developers to construct the size of building needed to solve this problem. The policy that's in our packet, again, it was discussed at our workshop, calls for tax abatements that will help keep the building available. And that's what's before council this evening.
Mr. Mayor, I think I said at the workshop, but I think this is a great policy to have, and I fully support this. I think this is one of the wise things to do.
Would like to make a motion?
Sure, I'll make a motion to accept the Bel Aire speculative industrial building policy and authorize the mayor to sign.
Second.
We have first and we have 2 seconds. Any questions or comments? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. All right. And they can start on that tomorrow, right? All right, guys. Item C here is the advisory board ordinance, again, that we talked about at our last workshop towards the end of it. We struggled, as you guys know, keeping members on the Community Development Advisory Board, and as such, they failed to have a quorum for a number of meetings, and I'm recommending eliminating this board and simply creating a volunteer committee. Jackie's completed research on how to remove this board from the codes and can answer any questions. And I'd just like to say this is by no means a slight towards that committee. Talked about at our workshop that this is a committee that has run its course and has been extremely valuable to this community, and I want to thank them. And matter of fact, the remaining members still plan to be involved and volunteer, but this takes a lot of the formality out, and we can still continue to have volunteers at our events. And again, this is actually a good sign that we're able to kind of move away from this volunteer-led committee.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I think this is an excellent ordinance to put into play, just because it gives us gives the governing body more creativity as far as coming up with boards or committees that are needed just for a short time, and we don't have to go back and change everything and then change it back when it's ended. And I think this is an excellent thing, and I make a motion to approve an ordinance concerning the amendment of Chapter 2, Article 7 of the City Code of Bel Aire, Kansas, in connection with authorizing the governing body to create advisory boards and similar bodies by resolution, all within the City of Bel Aire, Sedgwick County, Kansas, and authorize the mayor to sign.
Second.
First and second, are there any other questions before I call the roll call vote? Councilmember Benaj?
Yes.
Councilmember Elsoff?
Aye.
Councilmember Hawes?
Aye.
Councilmember Martine?
Aye.
Councilmember Smith?
Aye.
And it passes. And again, a big thanks to Danielle and Jeanette, who've kind of been there from the carrying the lion's share of these last few months and continuing on as volunteers. We're blessed. We truly are. You guys see the the minutes in our meeting in our packet here from other committees, and we're blessed with great volunteers who serve our community. Final item to come before council this evening is 37th and Woodlawn intersection. This is an easement. This intersection was originally owned by Bel Aire, Wichita, and Sedgwick County. Last year, Bel Aire de-annexed our portion and Wichita annexed. However, we keep a portion of the right-of-way for our entry monument and other utilities, which is super important. But that does have a traffic light in our right-of-way and would like an easement to access their signal. This is one of those, can't we all just get along? We got to make it all formal and official, and who's liable for this square, and all that. So that is what is in our packet and for us this evening. It is that granting that easement for the city of Wichita so that they can get to their traffic light and step, I guess, a little bit onto our easement.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Just one quick question. Can you clarify what is exactly the difference between the easement and the right-of-way, and how will the easement work with our sign being on that corner?
Yes. Okay, so the easement allows Wichita to come on our property, which actually is the right-of-way in that area. It's the part it's from the curb to a certain point on the land, on the property back. So it allows Wichita to walk on that property for the sole purpose of maintaining their utilities, which I think is a box of utility wires that are connected to that signal light. So that's...
So it's specifically just so that they can walk on that corner.
Yes.
What does it look like if we should, for some reason, ever need to revoke that easement in the future for some unforeseen reason?
Well, it's a permanent easement. That is a permanent easement. It travels with the land, so it is kind of a pretty difficult thing to revoke unless we were to have a reason to revoke it. And we did include in this easement that if Wichita ever removes that traffic signal, the easement automatically reverts back. It disappears. But you can revoke a permanent easement, but it requires some special finessing. I'd have to look into that to see exactly what special circumstances would need to happen for that to happen. If you know.
What are some cases where we might wish we hadn't granted them an easement? I'm just trying to understand, you know, what's the downside to this?
The downside, we tried to write it pretty tightly. I mean, if we were to say Wichita has an easement to come on our property to do general maintenance or general things, the more generally you write an easement, the more flexibility that person has to make you regret giving them that easement. But so long as they have that traffic signal there that benefits citizens of Bel Aire and that pursues a public safety interest, it's hard for me to imagine. And they are municipalities, so they have certain kind of expectations on what they might come on that easement, how they might approach that easement and treat that easement when they're on the property. It's a pretty safe easement as far as I don't see them creating liability for us or making us regret that easement. If they were to come onto the property and let's say in that maintenance of that traffic signal box cause an explosion, that would be their liability. So we don't gain additional liability for mistakes or errors they make. Typically, if you think about if you grant your neighbor an easement and they come on your property to access something that they own, and they abuse that easement by making excessive noise and doing other things, you could get into a legal, you would have grounds for litigation. I just don't see the city of Wichita using this easement to do something other than what's specifically stated in this easement that would cause us to regret doing it. I can do some research if you'd want to table this item. I can look and see what look for more risks, but I really can't think of anything sitting right here.
Okay.
Would this ordinance allow them, or this easement allow them to do excavation?
No, it's for the sole, if and only if it is directly related to the maintenance of that utilities. Not new utilities, but existing utilities.
Only existing.
So as of now, we know that there's a box, and I hate to call it a box, there's some feature that's directly related to that traffic signal.
Right.
And that is all they can ever come on that easement to maintain under this agreement. If they wanted to, let's say that the technology evolved and they needed to install something different, we'd have to get a new easement because this easement only covers the existing feature there.
And the other thing is we require other utility companies to get permits from us to do utility easement work. So, for example, we have these type of agreements through franchise agreements with Westar, Kansas Gas, and so they can go in our easements and install electric lines. Westar, same thing. They have to get a permit from us to say what they're going to do and that they put it back to the way it was supposed to be. So that would be part of this process too. So they couldn't come in and just start excavating and do whatever they want in that easement.
So the city of Wichita would have to get a permit from us to do that if they needed to do excavation?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And what if somebody gets hurt while they're working on that easement? Does the city have any liability for that?
It's fact-based. If we created the condition, but in a short summary and without specific facts, if the city created the condition, knowingly created the condition, and that didn't fall under our immunity, it's possible that the city could be liable. I don't want to give a specific example, but maybe if it had something to do with weather conditions that were just poorly maintained and the city failed to maintain that property because it belongs to us, that may raise issues. However, it just depends. If Wichita were coming on that property, you know, they're a municipality, so they hold a different kind of, they're not your regular reasonable person. They are kind of held at a higher standard. They understand the conditions that exist.
Okay.
So it doesn't outright create liability. And neighboring cities often grant easements to one another to come on the property to handle things like this.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, I have a question.
Yes.
This intersection and traffic signal or equipment has presumably been here for years, right? This isn't something new, so I was just curious what prompted this request for making an easement in the first place?
I don't recall what was in place before.
So the way it was is that the intersection was kind of divided into 4 quadrants, and we actually owned the northwest quadrant of the intersection, and the road going to the north, and then 37th going to the west. So, and I don't know how the signal got there, but the signal was put there in our right-of-way, in our easement, and I'm sure some governing body or city administrator at that time said, "Yeah, you want to put a signal up. We don't want to have to pay for that. You put it up and pay for it." So, and then Sedgwick County had the north east corner, and then Wichita had the south, and so I think you all came on about the time when we said, this is a mess for police and stuff trying to do enforcement. And so the county and us agreed to, okay, we'll de-annex that and you can annex that. So it's actually your right-of-way now. And so, but we had utilities, water and sewer lines in that because it was our right-of-way. And then we had our monument there as well. And so we said, well, wait a minute, we don't want to have to give this up and then go to you and get an easement to get to ours. We would rather keep that to us and you get an easement from us to come and get your sign. So that's kind of how we got to where this is at now.
Right, because in that original, they wanted that northwest corner with our monument, and they wanted us to come to them. So as a part of this whole package deal, I mean, you think about it, Wichita said, okay, we'll take the intersection, we'll maintain it, we'll do road updates, we'll take care of the signal, and we'll own the right-of-way around it. And Bel Aire negotiated to keep that northwest corner. In keeping that, Ann's concern was Wichita would then possibly, as the signal equipment got old and would possibly abandon that signal equipment. Not to say that that's what they would do, but we'd have to then maintain it and be in charge of that traffic signal, and that can be a costly burden if it's on our property.
We got rid of it once.
Right. And so that was her concern, was making sure Wichita still maintains that signal. So it just made sense with all of those factors considered to do an easement, to grant an easement.
I'll just say I appreciate the fact that, for Ann, looking out for that, and for you as well, Jackie, as glad, that we keep that right away for our utilities there. So, yeah. So, and what's sad is this is the cleaned up version of this mess.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
Well, to answer Justin's question, that light was put in like late 70s, early 80s, and Bel Aire did take care of it. Excuse me. And it just got so expensive back then that they were friends with Wichita, or we were, and we got them to take that light, and we don't want it back. Not really. I mean, I'd give them the easement too, because it was running really expensive, and it seemed like every time there was an accident, the light would go out, and Bel Aire had to repair it. So I don't remember who was on council at that time, but they talked with Wichita and got them to take that light. And I think we still have the light at 37th and Oliver, right? Or did they take that?
I'm just not sure.
I can't remember. But anyway, we don't want that light back. It's too expensive.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I appreciate the clarification on this and the extra information. It sounds like that this is kind of part of that package deal that we've kind of generally already agreed to in terms with Wichita. I guess my only and last question on this is, does it need to be a permanent easement, or are there alternative easements that might be like a 20-year easement? Because a lot can change in 10 or 20 years, and so the permanent nature of things is maybe what I would question the most there. So I don't know what the options are.
We can do an easement for a certain amount of time if you all would prefer that. The way I kind of anchored it in my mind was this specific, the lifetime of this specific utility. Once that expires, the easement will go away. Not knowing that lifetime, you know, having this easement filed with the Register of Deeds would be kind of an easy way to do it. You could do a 20-year easement, and then in 20 years that would expire, and in Wichita would either petition to get another easement, or the light and everything in that intersection or the utility would revert back to Bel Aire.
Are you saying that today it's already going to be tied to the lifetime of that traffic light?
Yes, it says right here.
I guess I didn't fully understand that nuance there.
Yes, and I focused on that. It says in the second paragraph, franchise utilities are hereby granted the right to enter upon said premises at any time for the purpose of operating, maintaining, and repairing such utility and any appurtenances thereto. The easement shall terminate when the city no longer owns such utility on the premises. So described. So the specific one on the premises, not utilities in general, not future utilities, but the one on the premises.
Okay.
So what's the implication of a technological upgrade of that utility?
So long as it affects that material right there, it's fine. If you have to pull it out and do an alternative easement, that we could argue, and we would argue if that were what council ordered, that that's no longer the same utility. You need to come back and request a new easement.
Okay.
Because it's fixed to the actual material in that place now.
Right. Very good.
So,
thank you.
You know, we can still look at it and look at other options if you're more comfortable. I understand the permanency of it is a lot. It is tied to this utility, this specific utility.
Mr. Mayor, I have a follow-up question on that. Since we're getting into the details of the language of this, I do think I need clarification on when you say, I guess, the language of the utility. Does that mean are we saying the presence of the light at all? So the physical light that's there, if that physical structure, whatever's there, if that gets replaced, but it's still in the same, it's still a traffic light, does that cancel the easement?
Yes.
Or, okay.
Yes. If the existing feature gets replaced, then that's a new. It is no longer the one on the premises as of this date.
Okay. Thank you.
I think this is also a good thing too. They, you know, if that were to be damaged or something too, you know, because it's their responsibility and not ours. We want to make sure that they are able to get there and take care of that. So.
Mr. Ware?
Yes.
I think I'm comfortable with that given what we've just heard, and so I'm going to move to approve an easement granting the City of Wichita permission to enter certain portions of the right-of-way along the intersection of 37th Street and Woodlawn Street for the sole purposes of operating, maintaining, and repairing existing utilities owned by the City of Wichita on that northwest corner as legally described.
Second.
We have a first and a second. Are there any other questions or comments? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Discussion of future issues. I don't have any at this time. I would like to ask council for a 10-minute executive session for attorney-client where we can invite in the city attorney and the city manager.
Mr. Mayor, I did have a future issue topic.
Oh, okay.
I just wanted
I'm sorry.
to bring up. It's
Yeah.
okay. In our packets, we get monthly reports from the police department that Chief Atterbury provides us, and it's not something we always talk about as far as a topic at the council meeting. But one thing that stood out to me this month is that the chief looked to be about a total of 10 hours of training regarding the legalization of marijuana as a topic. And I was just curious if there was some venue in which we might be able to either at a council meeting or a workshop or perhaps at a town hall. I'd leave it up to you, Mr. Mayor, to kind of figure out what would be appropriate. But I wonder if we could get kind of a briefing on what his perspective is and all the training and information, because I know it's a topic that kind of is simmering in the community with our neighboring state, Colorado, having the marijuana legalization, and I know that's swirling in our legislature as a potential topic at the state level. And I was just curious if we could just kind of find out more information about that, or I'll leave it to you to how we might handle that in the future.
Yeah, I think something down the line.
Sure.
Down the road, especially the state legislature is going to wrap their session up at the end of April, and if they were to move that way, we could certainly look at it. But at this point, I mean, it's not like the city can pass that law. So
yeah, and I'm my interest is just curiosity on what law enforcement perspective is, not necessarily us changing some sort of ordinance or law, at the city level per se.
And I would venture to guess without talking to him, so maybe I shouldn't be saying this, but this is training, so it's what he's learned as opposed to his opinion.
Right.
So,
yes.
So, yeah, I mean, that could be an issue that we need to deal with down the road. I don't think we're there right now, but appreciate you bringing that up. It's something to...
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
The only thing there might be if we needed to amend our legislative policy such that it had a section pertaining to that, because the state government looks at those laws. I know that we use that for discussion with the legislators, and so that may be a thing to think about. To Councilman Elsoff's point there,
That's a good idea too.
For that, I'm going to ask our city attorney to weigh in at this point.
I would say there's a lot of research and material going on right now. I think that to get perspective from what's going on in Topeka as far as the legislature is one thing. To get perspective from the training of the law as is a different thing. So that's something that maybe in future workshops, once what's going on in Topeka becomes more clear, if that's what you're wanting, we can prepare something that outlines what's going on in Topeka. Absolutely. Versus the chief can truly tell you what they are required to do at this time legally, and that's kind of a different thing. So I can look out for the information as it comes out and what's going on, and possibly get on a workshop agenda.
There is something we could look at too here at City Hall if we wanted to. We could invite in some of our our legislators that cover Bel Aire to maybe have a town hall. Obviously, it's not us, it's not our opinions, it's not that, we can invite in, Senator McGinn, Senator Masterson, Representative Capps, and who's our other representative? Come in, maybe they can give a brief update, and we can invite the citizens in to, if that's something that maybe we want to look at, we could.
Yeah, that sounds like a good idea.
Let's think about that.
That'd be a good elected official to elected official, sort of.
Like I said, it'd be, them giving the update. This isn't, we'd basically be providing the venue, and they, citizens can come in and then talk with their elected officials at the state level.
I know the chief does have opinions from a law enforcement standpoint. He does have opinions.
Okay. All right. Well, I appreciate you bringing that up, and we'll look at maybe a date sometime in March already. We could bring our elected officials.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
I'll move to go into executive session for the sole purpose of discussing attorney-client privilege. For the sole purpose of discussing executive client privilege, and invited the city manager and the city attorney for a period of 10 minutes to resume at 8:25.
That's first. We have a second. First and second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. We're in executive session until 8:25. just had executive session. No binding action was taken. I'm going to call the meeting back to order. Is there any other business to come before City Council this evening?
Mr. Mayor, I motion we adjourn.
Second.
First and second, any questions or comments? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. We are adjourned at 8:27.